Eddie the Magic Monk. Eddie the Magic Monk. Eddie the Magic Monk. Eddie the Magic Monk.
Hey guys, it's Eddie the Magic Monk here. As you can see, we now have some sort of object that we can move around on the level, and if you click your mouse, you will change the color of the triangle. And let's have a look at our code. And what we want to do this lesson is teach you guys a new way of organizing your code into objects. And why do we want to do that? Because if you have a look inside the draw function, we've got all of these lines of code, okay, just for drawing this object. So if I want to draw some other things onto the level, let's say some enemies or some bullets, or I want to write the score on the level, just all of these things, you're going to get very confused because of how many lines of code there are going to be. So we need to think of a way to separate our code into better organized sections. So the way to do that is to use object-oriented programming, and that is you're simply going to look at what's on your level or what's on your canvas, and you're going to separate the things into objects. So the main object that we can see right now is every single thing that I have moving with my mouse. That is going to be one single object, and let's call that object the player object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function that helps me define what a player object looks like. So let's go right down to the bottom. Let's create a new function and call it player. Okay, so within this function is where I'm going to get the code for drawing the object, all of this stuff. So within this function, I'm going to define another function called display. So I'm going to say this dot display. So why do we need this? Basically, this represents this particular player. Okay, this particular player that I'm creating, we're going to have a function that can be executed by this object. Some people call it a method. So the method or an action that this player can conduct, which is called display, is going to be a function. And what do we do when we display this? Okay, what do we do when we display this? What I want to do is I want to copy all of this code. Okay, all of this code that I've used to draw the player, I'm going to copy all of this, and I'm gonna cut it, and I'm gonna put that inside the display function, and I'm gonna fix up the indenting for a bit. So all of this should be indented a bit more. Okay, so yes, so it's indented properly. So within the player object, the player can display by executing all of this code. So what is going to happen is, now that I have cut all of this out from the draw function, I'm just going to get rid of all this commented out stuff because we don't need that anymore. If I save this and refresh, nothing is there anymore. Nothing is there anymore because the player is not drawn. So how do I create the player object? Because I've created a template for the player object, but I haven't actually created an object. So to create an object, what you need to do is you need to define a new variable called player. So actually I'm going to, instead of calling it player with a small case p, I'm going to call it player with a capital P, so you can tell the difference. So this particular player with a capital P is a variable. Okay, it's not the object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new player object, and I'm going to assign it to this variable, and then I'm going to show it. So player dot display, and using all of this code, it's going to help you display the player. So now we got the player back. So notice how inside the draw function I have now just got one line of code, and this line will pull out all of this stuff from the player object and display it onto the screen. So that is a good way of separating your stuff. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about another concept in programming called separation of concerns. So let's look that up. Separation of concerns, what is that? In computer science, separation of concerns is a design principle for separating a computer program into distinct sections so that each section addresses a separate concern. A concern is a set of information that affects the code of a computer program. So we're saying that instead of putting all of this information in one big file, we should be separating it into smaller files. So if you have a look at our folder for the program, we currently just have two files, index.html and sketch.js. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another file called player.js, create a new text document, call it player.js, and I'm going to edit that file in Notepad++ as well. And I'm going to copy and paste all the code for the player, sorry, not copy and paste, cut it and put it inside this player.js so that it's separate to the sketch.js. So sketch.js is going to be focused on drawing what's on the screen, but the player.js is going to focus on drawing the actual player. So I've separated into two files. If you view the program right now, it's not going to work because it doesn't know where all the player code has gone. Okay, you're saying that new player, where is the player function for creating this object? It's totally disappeared. So what I need to do is to tell index.html. So let's now edit this file, index.html. And you can see that it's imported sketch.js into the program, but it hasn't imported player.js. So you simply need to copy and paste this line of code and put player.js instead of sketch.js for the new line. And then let's open it up again, and it's now working again. So it's now working with two files, sketch.js and player.js. So we have separated our program into two files, each of these containing a section which is related to the purpose of each file. The player.js has information to do with the player object, which is your whatever it is you're moving around with your mouse, and the sketch.js, it's going to draw things onto the screen. Now that brings us to the mouse click function is really changing the color of the triangle, which is part of the player. So instead of putting that here, I'm going to cut this. Let's get rid of this y equals y plus 10. And let's cut that bit here. And let's go to player.js and let's define a new function in the player function. This dot change color equals function, and then I'm going to put this code in here so that if I want to change color, I can simply just change the color inside the sketch function by calling player with a capital P dot change color. Okay, and this should help me change the color of the player. Right, change color with a capital C. So let's see if that still works. Yes, it's still changing color. So notice how everything is defined using object-oriented notation. The next thing that you want is to make sure that these variables, if they are directly related to the player object, you should be creating it inside the template. So what is a directly related object? So you've got triangle color, that's definitely related to the player. So let's cut that out and put that inside the player object. So let's put in this dot triangle color equals red, and let's, wherever triangle color occurs, so it's occurring in all these places, I'm gonna put this dot in front of it. This dot, this dot, this dot, where else? This dot and this dot. Okay, so why do I put this dot in front of the variable name? Because now I'm saying that this variable is now belongs to this particular player object. So it belongs to this variable now. Okay, and you can't access the triangle color anywhere else. So if I save that, refresh, it's still working. Okay, but I've removed the variable outside of this scope. So now I want to reduce the number of variables here. So direction equals right doesn't need to be there because we don't use that anywhere in our code anymore. And then x equals 0, y equals 0 really is the player object, isn't it? So let's now cut that and put that inside the player.js. And instead of variable, let's put this dot x and this dot y. And then wherever you can see x and y, let's search for it. Wherever you can see x, you need to change it to this dot x. So let's go Control F X. Yep. So let's go this dot x, put that over here. And then the same thing with y. So this dot x, this dot y. So it looks like you're copying and pasting a lot of code, but it's going to help you a lot in the future because later on, you're going to be creating other objects with their own x and y coordinates, and you don't want them to be mixed up with the x and y coordinates of this player object. Okay, so let's save that. Let's refresh. and it's still working, so that's fine. So you might say, well, Eddie, what have we done in this tutorial? And what we've done is we've reorganized the whole program into an object-oriented program where everything in our level is going to be based on objects. So right now we just have one single object on the screen, and that's the player object. Later on we can have enemies, we can have bullets, we can have whatever we want. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.